Hey guys, welcome back. Robocraft Early Access coverage. This is episode 55. I'm Enigmius, and today it's a very special build. Very near and dear to my heart. It's the return of Spider Bee. That's right, our Tier 8 Flying Rail Walker being reworked for Tier 10. Now, in my defense, I started this build yesterday, and I basically got it finished as of today, before the additional 25% buff to rail damage. So we got a buff last week that was I think it was 25% in tier 10 for rail cannons, and we got another 25%. So it was 22,000 damage for a railgun yesterday. Now it's 27,000 for a tier 10 railgun. I ain't no bandwagon jumper. You guys know I like the sniper thing, and it was the kind of wet noodle impact of the rail cannons that kept me away from them for a little while. I guess I picked the right time to come back to them. Now, I really like the concept of the Spider Bee, a flying rail walker. The idea is we're not flying around. We're never flying around shooting at people. That's just silly. We're using the wings and the thrusters to allow ourselves to move to the places we need to be as quickly as we possibly can, and to relocate quickly so that we can take advantage of situations as they arise throughout the match. The last thing you want to do is get stuck too far away from the action to do anything, and by the time you relocate to get there, the situation is completely changed again. Now the action is somewhere else. I like the idea of the walker for a rail vehicle because it's relatively stable on land, and it's got the flexibility to cling to various ledges and things of that nature. We can kind of peek over, shoot, then scoot back behind cover. It's just a great combination if you can make it work. Now, not surprisingly, we're doing an asymmetric build, and I've been talking about this the last several episodes. I wanted to kind of start to push the limits a little bit. We've been doing a lot of armor core stuff. This is still going to be an armor core build, but we've just been focused on the very basics, very symmetrical vehicles, bots, whatever you want to call them, because it's easier to build that way. It's easier to maintain balance, especially when you're talking about things that fly or hover. You want them balanced so that they don't tip on their own. It's very frustrating when your vehicle just tips over on its own. But if we take it to the next level, we start thinking about asymmetrical builds. Things aren't mirrors of one half going over to the other. They're different, and as you can see with the railguns already, we're starting off with the core element that's going to force this bot to be asymmetrical in certain areas. I'm not deliberately going out of my way to make it as wonky as I possibly can. I'm just not saying to myself, well, whatever you do on one side, you have to mirror on the other. Not like that. The benefit to doing it this way is that our bot is a little bit longer than the previous Spider Bee, but it's much more narrow. So theoretically, it's going to be a bit harder to shoot at range because you're not going to have as much of a profile to shoot at. That's kind of a good thing. I'm also keeping in mind some of the lessons that we learned from the Spider Bee. One, the position of the legs seemed to work much better for us when we had the legs oriented forward and backward, like you see them going in now, as opposed to the very common orientation of sticking out the sides of the bot. It makes it easier for landing. It makes it easier to correct after maybe not so great landing. The legs will actually correct the bot for you so you don't tip over on your face. Sometimes, as you know, I find a way to tip over on my face, even if I give myself all the tricks in the world to recover from it. But mostly, right now, you can see we're getting all the components on, all of the components for this bot, so that we can see how everything fits together before we start building the body around it. Because if we start building the body around it, especially with an asymmetrical build, and we decide later that we want to change something, that's when stuff gets kind of wonky. That's when connections weaken, because you had a strong connection but you had to tweak it to make something fit, and you forgot to kind of shore it up in another place. Not necessarily the best. So if we use these white blocks, again, my favorite layout device is the white block. Get everything connected, get everything working the way we wanted to see it, and then once we're happy with it, we can start worrying about building the body around it. Pretty straightforward as these kinds of things go. Now, the SMG, the TX1 SMG event, I think has started. Apparently there's a counter in the game, so whenever you score a kill with the TX1 SMG, you get some sort of crazy notification, lets you know, yeah, you scored a kill. fantastic. I won't be building a bot to compete in that. And it seemed fitting to bring the Spider Bee back when having the ability to specifically target those gigantic guns and pop them off for 250 CPU destroyed each. Kind of neat. Realistically speaking, there's so many things that I want to do that require RP. I'm more interested in winning than popping off guns and kind of leaving myself vulnerable to everyone else. It's mostly just in the spirit of fun. I mean, someone's got to keep them in check. We don't want just everyone running around with, you know, TX1 SMGs. That would get really, really dull in very short order. I'm interested to see how the Megabots are going to be implemented relative to Tier 10, as in, are they going to be included in Tier 10? Are they going to be in their own separate tier? Are they going to start off included in Tier 10 until there are enough people with them to put them in their own separate tier? I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out what happens. But for the time being, my goal is to get as many competitive bots into Tier 10 as I possibly can. So I've got Pretty Hate Machine that is mostly done for the time being. Once I've leveled up a little bit more, I can take another look and see if I want to change things around, maybe swap some electroplates for some blocks. I had to pull apart one of my little mini Tier 10 SMG hovers that I made. I didn't do the build for either one of them. They're just wee little guys. There's nothing particularly special about them, but I needed the blocks for this guy. I ran out of RP after I bought the guns and the legs and the wings and all that other stuff. So that leaves me with one Tier 10 SMG hover, and then this will be my third bot, so I'll be well representative for the three weapon types. Well represented for the three different weapon types, and have that flexibility, but more importantly, have three competitive bots that I can take into matches in a day. And assuming the timing is good and the teams are decent and I'm not doing too much derping of my own, really kind of crank out the RP in short order and not have to worry about it. The more Tier 10 bots you have, the more RP you make, as long as you're winning. So that's kind of a good thing. Look at the gun mount. Is it? I don't even think, for a lot of you, I have to tell you that this is a gun mount anymore, because you can tell by the shape that that's exactly what it is, not to mention, you know, where it's located relative to the gun. This is where I'm actually going to find that this whole asymmetry thing is really, really cool, because I don't have to worry about, you know, remembering what I did on one side so that I can duplicate it on the other. I can just build the gun mount however I want to build it. The basic shape is easy to duplicate because it's, you know, it's only like 8 or 10 blocks around the gun. It's not difficult to remember that. But then in terms of the connections and stuff, it doesn't matter what I'm doing on this side when I go to the other side, because the other side is completely different. It's going to be mounted to the chassis in a different way. And that's kind of cool. So we would like, if possible, to protect the thrusters. I've kind of got them in line here. It helps to keep the bots a little more narrow, and also one kind of protects the other. It's bordering on like thruster stick mentality of just having all kinds of thrusters that kind of, it's not going to add to the survivability of the bot necessarily. What it is going to add to the survivability of the thrusters. Now this is going to be a very, very heavy bot as flyers go. 2 Tier 10 thrusters isn't going to cut it, but it's adequate. One thing I can tell you, jumping ahead a little bit, having done a little bit of testing with the near complete chassis, is that if you start a match and you jump up and you want to fly straight up, even on an angle, I guess that's not straight up, you know what I mean, you want to fly in an upward direction, there's not enough thrust from these thrusters to make that happen. You have to do a little bit of low-level maneuvering to build up speed, and then you can start worrying about the inclines. I can't see myself being happy about putting enough thrusters on this thing to actually make that work, so that you can just basically jump and go up and zoom, off you go. But I can say that I've got a little bit of CPU left over, so we'll kind of see. The legs on this thing are really kind of restrictive. You don't really think about it too much because they don't look that big, but because they have that side-to-side thing going on, they're almost as bad as a TX1 SMG in terms of how much space they want and how many blocks they will restrict access to just because the leg is there. You can see now, even just trying to finish off this gun mount, I'm colliding with the leg. What can you do? There's only so much you can do. That's what you can do. The spine on this is actually a little bit narrow in the front, just because that's how things went together with the legs, but as we get towards the back, we're going to flare it out to 3 wide. just for that extra little bit of beef, we like to be able to support the bot as much as possible. And it's also very important that every connection we make, again, going back to the very basics of Armored Core, you make the basic connection, and then you see what you can do to make it stronger. It's a two-step process. You make this, you can see here, is just basically a single row of prisms that lead back to the spine of the bot, and now we can look at it and say, okay, what can we do to make those connections stronger? What can we do to protect them? So we do the gun mount that protects it. Anything hitting the gun mount can't transfer damage to the block that the gun is on. That's the way it's designed. And then we have that spindly bit that we have to look after, and we protect it, or, you know, make it so that it's stronger by adding more blocks in an intelligent way. We think about how we're placing the blocks and how that makes things to connect. If you look at it as a block-by-block process, it's really straightforward. It's not as complicated as I think some people have it made out to be, which is kind of a shame, because it's not to imply that people aren't smart enough to grasp it. It's just they're kind of looking at it, and before they've even really given it a chance, they look at it and say, there's no way. Half the time I don't even know what's going on, so there's no way I can try that. It's dead easy, but it takes a little bit of time spent with that system, getting it to work, and then testing it, finding out what works and what doesn't. Before you know it, you're having a blast building almost as much as you have fun in the matches themselves. So I'm still an advocate of the system, and it's not because I came up with the refinement on the Triforce thing. It's because it works, and it's fun to build with, and it's really straightforward once you get right down to the nitty-gritty of it. So you can see pushing back the gun mounts a little bit, just adding a little bit more bulk to them, a little bit more mass, means they can take more damage before they start doing crazy things. But again, the gun mount itself is so that we can take repeated hits in the area of the gun before we lose the gun, theoretically. Realistically, the anti-gunbrella means, unless people are specifically targeting the gun mounts with a high precision weapon, it's academic. It's basically you're going to lose the gun no matter what happens. We want to give ourselves as much chance to take extra damage as possible, because if we don't, we're a balloon. That's the term that I've coined for bots that just spontaneously explode all the time. Just someone looks at you the wrong way, your bot explodes. That's a balloon. That's basically what it is by definition. And you can see we're actually getting to the end of the whole gun mounting fiasco on the two front ends mounts. Words are hard. It's looking kind of snazzy. It's looking not bad. Anytime you get the asymmetrical thing, it's almost hard to do it in a way that's ugly. But you can see now we're taking the spine, we're widening it out a little bit. But this is about as far as we can go for today. The next episode, which will be out tomorrow, if you're watching these on the days that they come out, we'll have the remainder of the chassis built to almost completion. We always revise our builds after the fact, so it's not ever completely done, but enough to get us into some matches and start shooting things that, you know, people don't want us to shoot. And that's the whole point. So if you want to be notified when I add that next video and others, you can always subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on social media, get notifications that way. Links for those are always in the information section below the video. Please leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.